This is a CW Spiral, a podcast run by two Barchies and a Bughead. We're your hosts, Sabrina Reed,
Michael Patterson,
and Reed Gaudens,
bringing you history about the network, the latest news, and in-depth spoiler-filled discussions of some of our favorite shows on the CW. Okay, so the CW canceled our mini pod last week, but we get to get it back this week. So we'll be having a short pod, but a fun pod. But of course, we have to start everything with the news. And Reed, I'm going to take it away for you for 90210 news.
Yes, I wanted to, take a minute to talk about a cause that I'm very passionate about, and that is 90210 getting back on the CW app and the CWTV.com. When that news came, it was unexpected, but very exciting because the show has been so difficult to find, it feels like, for fans. And I know when we did our 90210 pod in September, which if you haven't listened to that, go listen to that or watch the videos on our YouTube channel. Literally like the next day, the CW pulled it. And I was like, what's the odds? But it's back. So everyone go watch all 5 seasons. I'm currently in season 5 of my re-binge, and it is glorious. Just top to bottom teen drama mess.
Yay. I wonder if they got the licensing to put the original songs in.
That is a good thing for me to research.
Because that would be fun. Then we could have the moments that you were talking about that Michael and I did not get
I know, I was like,
experience.
Chasing Pavements gave me chills all over again. And you were like, what? Like, we did not have Adele.
No, we did not. But maybe we will. I'll have to push play and see whether or not she has been inserted back into the spot that she should be in. But yeah, you guys, you should go watch it on CWTV.com and the CW app. Get your life. I mean, they're presenting, I hope that means that we're getting more CW classics dropping on the streamer, since apparently it's a big deal for them now. Bring back Nikita, please. I'd love to watch it.
Yeah, same.
Yeah, and then as far as that's it for CW news, because the mid-season schedule is not out yet. They, along with CBS, have yet to drop theirs, which is like, I'm getting obsessive with it. Like, I'm always on the press site. Like, did you release the press release? Deadline doesn't have it. TV Line doesn't have it. When are you releasing the mid-season schedule? We need to know.
I guarantee it'll be at least 20 minutes after we wrap recording today.
Right. You're very right. But that'll be okay, though. It'll just miss this pod episode, and we'll just either be excited or be dragging them once again once it comes out.
Yeah, either next week we'll be excited or we will once again be just exhausted and just start dragging.
That's a mood at this point.
It's such a roller coaster. Hopefully soon they'll even out and we can all just breathe again until it's cancellation season. But until then, I just want to be able to breathe without being choked by the CW.
Yeah,
it would be nice for a week or two.
Yes, but that's it for the news. So we're going to hop right into what we're watching. So what is going on in Blue Valley, Michael?
Oh, speaking of being choked for a moment or two, I was choked up for a moment or two in last night's episode of Stargirl because did not see this one coming. I've said this show tends to do very much like the calm after the storm and the calm before the next storm. In a few of its episodes, it'll build towards a moment and then calm down and then build towards a moment and then calm down. This was the calm down point, and I didn't expect it to also be such a stormy episode, so to speak. So it was all about the Crocs, the family of former villains that are trying to redeem themselves. Lawrence/Larry, who used to be the villain sportsmaster, is now besties with Pat. Paula/Tigress now is now besties with Courtney's mom, Barbara. And they've really come leaps and bounds and overcome their demons, and they're basically residents of Blue Valley now. They were the original frenemies, and now they're friends. There's no more enemies about it. And so the episode opened with them and they're contacting their daughter, showing how happy they are in life. They went out for a run together. They just went through Blue Valley like any normal resident would. And then they stopped outside Grandpa and Grandma McCann's house and were like, we always protected our people. Well, Pat and Barbara and the Whitmores are our people now. And those guys over there are our enemies. What are we going to do about it? And Paula was like, well, we've sworn off violence. We can't do anything about that, but we do have to protect the Whitmores and the Dugans at all costs. So that was very much the intro to the episode. Meanwhile, Mike and Jakeem, who were had a run-in with the massive gorilla in the end of last week's episode were still trapped in the woods trying to escape.
Forgot about the gorilla.
Yeah. I didn't. I always love it, and I'll say this about Nancy as well. I always love it when you pick right up where the cliffhanger left off, and this very much did that. They were still lost in the woods. They tried to use the Thunderbolt pen to wish them back home, but the Thunderbolt pen needs you to be very specific. So when it said wish them to be back home, they literally just ended up back in the forest because it's still in Blue Valley, which is still their home. So they lost that wish and they couldn't get home. So they had to just find their own way home, and they were on the run. But Pat was worried that the reason they went missing was because of Grandpa and Grandma Icicle, because Mike killed Jordan, the original Icicle. So he was, since all hell broke loose with the grandparents last week, he was worried that they had kidnapped them. So he and Starman decided to visit the McCants, and Grandpa Icicle is now out of the hospital after his heart attack last week, but he was weak and he was recovering, and thankfully his psychotic wife was not there. So he basically revealed how they were chased out of their home country when they were younger, and it's happened with generations because of their ice powers. The country hunted them and tried to get rid of them, which is why they migrated to the US. And but he said,
Wait, can I ask a question?
Sure.
Is it a real country or a fictional country?
I think they said they were Norwegian, so I assume it's Norway. Okay. And that's why they consistently speak in different language as well. And
I've always got to check with these shows. Like, where are we?
Is it Gotham City or is it a real place?
Yeah.
But he said basically he is definitely the calmer of the two, the more polite and the more relaxed of the two. And it does sound like he, in another life, he would have been willing to let it go. He hates the hatred that this feud has caused. However, he said, you took our son from us and we cannot forget that. So please leave this house, and preferably leave the country before my wife comes back, because she will come for you. So Pat and Starman left unhappily and worried basically about Mike and everyone. But Grandma Icicle didn't take too kindly to that visit. I don't know how she found out, but then she showed up at the Whitmore house and tried to kill Barbara. That was like, our son thought the world of you. He was going to save us all, and then you all killed him. It's such a shame you won't be around to see his world. And she literally went to fire an icicle at Barbara, and then an arrow was shot to the door beside her, and it was Paula/Tigress said, leave my friend alone. And she said, I won't miss on purpose next time, because Tigress never misses. So the grandma just walked with her tail between her legs and stormed out of the house, upset that her son's former allies had turned against her. And so Barbara, it was a big moment for Paula, because again, Paula has become such a good friend of Barbara's, and she's no longer a villain. And she said, we're going to need to teach you how to protect yourself. So she started showing Paula how to use the crossbow to fight, or started showing Barbara how to use the crossbow to fire arrows. And meanwhile, as all of this was happening, the grandma had told Cameron that he needed to avenge his father's death, and you need to kill them. And Cameron wasn't very happy about that, but he decided to go off and get answers. And he had this really powerful moment with Courtney. And she said, I didn't want to tell you because I didn't want to ruin the image of your father, because you thought the world of him. And it was a really nice moment, because it de-escalated the conflict. He understood that and he appreciated that. And it sounded like he was willing to let it go, except the fact that somebody killed his father. He was like, but did you have to kill him though? And he was like, tell me who killed my father. So Courtney lied and told him it was her, because she knew that he wouldn't do anything to her. So he stormed off. It was like, I never, ever want to see you again. But he still cared about her, so he wouldn't do anything about it, which is important, because I think if he found out it was Mike, he wouldn't have been so lenient. So he stormed off. And now back to the most interesting part of the episode. Mike and Jakeem were in the woods, still trying to run away from the gorilla, and they heard the gorilla roar in the background. And as they were running through the forest, they got trapped by like an animal trap. They were pulled up into the tree by a net, and they were like, who set this? Was it the gorilla? And then you heard in the background, what are you two idiots doing here? And they turned around and it was Cindy. And they tried to tell her all about the gorilla, and we need to protect you. And she was like, you need to protect me. She was like, this is what the trap was for. And yeah, you guys have wandered into it. She was like, go back to Blue Valley, go tell them what's going on. I have got this.
So she was gonna catch the gorilla.
She wanted to catch the gorilla so that she could clear her own name, but more importantly, rub it in everyone's faces and be like, "No, I was innocent the whole time." She still hasn't gotten over that, which is typically Cindy thing to do. She wants to do the right thing, but she also wants to like reap the rewards of it as well. So they went back home, and Cindy stayed in the woods to catch it. It was the only scene she was in the episode, but like it was a good scene. I remember thinking that it's been like 3 or 4 episodes since we saw her, and that was a good scene to bring her back, because even though she left, she's still very much doing the right thing. And as all this was happening, the Crocs went to visit the McCann grandparents, and they basically said that we knew your son very well. We worked with your son. He was our ally in the ISA, and his way of life didn't work. You said Jordan wanted a better life for your family, so you would no longer have to run. And that was what his misguided idea of a better America looked like. That's why he became a villain. But it's no longer causing anyone to be happy. It's creating direct conflict. It's creating hate. And Jordan wanted a better world for his son. The world that we're living in right now, with all these rivalries and feuds, is not a better world. And shockingly enough, that kind of got through to the grandmother. She was not for listening to them. And then when they said that, it kind of did. So Lawrence took out his sportsmaster mask, which he used to wear as part of the ISA, and left it on the table and was like, if we can leave this life behind, so can you. And so then they left in peace, and both the Crocs held hands and smiled at each other. It was like, I think we've got through to them. So basically, they're proud of themselves that they managed to de-escalate the conflict without having to fight. And I think that was such an incredible moment for the two of them, because they were two villains that absolutely thrived on feuding, thrived on fighting, and they're probably the best fighters on the show. They've been involved in some great fight scenes in the past, but they managed to de-escalate the conflict with words and telling people how they felt and using themselves as an example. And that was a big moment for them. And it cut back to the McCants after that, and Grandma was crying, looking at a poster of Jordan, and just said, I miss him so much. And then Grandpa gave her a big hug. And it was just it was nice to see those two people not as like one-dimensional villains spouting lines about how they're going to kill people. And you kind of understood their motivations then. But very much the conflict has been de-escalated, and the former villains, the Crocs, were responsible for that. So I think they really came through in the end. And Mike and Jakeem then went back to Courtney's and told her all about the gorilla, and Pat revealed that he had heard of him before. And yes, it was the Ultra Humanite, who we all predicted it was last week. He said they were one of the most dangerous ISA villains they've ever faced. Because it was apparently a really, really smart scientist who decided to place his brain inside of a gorilla. So it is a person, but he's inside this body that was created for him that's basically indestructible, because he wanted to stop the JSA years ago. And he's one of the JSA's greatest failures, because they did manage to imprison him, but he escaped. And with the help of Dragon King, they built this gorilla body for him, which then they put his incredibly smart brain into. So he's incredibly dangerous. But all of this kind of like imbued a fire within Courtney, and she stood up in the living room. It was like, this is the next Eclipso. This is what it's all been building towards. Last year, the ISA and the JSA came together to stop Eclipso, and now we're all going to have to do it again. Everyone in this room, the bad guys, the good guys, we all love Blue Valley, and it's in danger now because of the Ultra Humanite, and we all have to team up to stop it, including the McCants. And they were like, no, we don't need those psycho grandparents on our side. But Courtney was like, no, we do. Good and bad has to come together to stop a far greater evil, which, let's be honest, that's what the theme of this season has been all about.
I was just going to say that's the subtitle.
Exactly. Frenemies. So it really, I have to say that this is the episode where it felt like most progress was done. Yet again, no costumes, no fighting, just some great human drama. And I feel like that's one of probably what Stargirl does best. And it really set the stage for the final 4 episodes. And 4 or 3, I don't know, I can't count. I'll tell you later. But it really, it was a turning point for the show. And I was very happy with that until the final scene. Because the Crocs were walking hand in hand through town, just like reflecting on how great they did, how they helped de-escalate conflict, how they really redeemed themselves, and how they actually have friends for once. They don't just have villains, they have actual friends in Pat and Barbara. And I was like, this is getting very much like a hero send-off. I don't like it. And And then they saw the posters for Lawrence / Larry's gym were all torn down off the wall, and all of them were like scattered towards a manhole. And they were like, somebody wants our attention. And this was just after they got a call from their daughter, Artemis, who was also a former villain, who said, I think she said she got into university or college. So it was a great moment for the parents. It was a great moment for the family. And then they said, we'll be home in a few minutes, love. And I was like, you're not getting home in a few minutes. And so they went into the sewer and they followed the trail of torn down gym posters, and they found the lair with all the TV screens of whoever has been watching them over the last 9 weeks. Of course, the screens were destroyed because the JSA had taken down all the cameras a few episodes ago. And just as they were looking, this hooded figure came out from behind them and stabbed Paula right in the stomach. And then Larry went to run towards him and he stabbed him as well. And the thing I noticed is Paula, as she was stood with the object stabbed in her, I noticed that parts of her skin started to turn slightly blue and then start to crack like ice. And then he pulled the blades out of both of them and they both fell together. And he ripped the mask off to reveal that it was Jordan, aka Icicle, aka the villain of season 1, who was shattered into thousands of pieces, is still alive. And he was like, at least the two of you will die together. And a really, really heartbreaking moment, Larry and Paula reached for each other on the floor and both said, I love you at the same time, as they both turned into ice sculptures. And you could see the tear running down Paula's face. And then Jordan went like that there. And literally they both shattered into thousands of pieces and then turned to dust.
There's so many moving parts to this show.
Right.
Yeah.
And so that was it. Icicle is back. That is why they finally decided to pull the trigger on the Cameron storyline now, after building towards it for seasons.
I'm kind of heartbroken still about Cameron and Courtney, because as a viewer, it's so bittersweet when you watch a character make a sacrifice like that for somebody that they care about. And you know they're taking that bullet so that this person can have some sort of inner peace, but it's so hard to watch as a viewer, because you're like, we know the truth, but he can't know it. It's like, I don't know, it broke my heart to hear that.
I feel like that'll play into the next 3 episodes, because now that Jordan's back, I think Cameron will get to see what his father was, who his father became, and that he was never the good person he ever thought that he was. And it's also interesting to me is that the villains of this piece so far it seemed to be the grandparents, but it was grief that was driving them. Yes, they turned into one-dimensional villains as a result, but it was very much grief that was driving them. So now that they've kind of addressed that and the grandparents are ready to move on, how will they react that their son is still alive and that he's still as evil as he ever was? I know for a fact that in the promo next week, Jordan takes off his gloves and you can see some of his fingers aren't fully formed and they're starting to turn back into ice. So I think whatever happened is that when he shattered, he wasn't put back together right. And maybe that's why he's wearing this hooded cloak or whatever to keep him together, because this very much is not an Icicle outfit. But yeah, I don't want to bury the lead here, but like it seems like Icicle was the one responsible for it all along. He was the one watching them on the cameras. And I said that the Ultra Humanite seems to be the one that was doing his bidding, but it very much feels like Icicle's been the one pulling the strings the whole time. He must have killed the gambler. He must have attacked Starman. So I love the fact that the subplot has played into the main story now, because I said that the Cameron story was very much a series story and the murder mystery was very much a season story. And it turns out they were both more connected than any of us knew. I'm gutted about the Crocs because they came on so far. I don't want to lose them. I love their relation. I loved Paula's relationship with Barbara, but I also liked Larry's relationship with Pat. It's hard to go. It's going to be, even though there's only like 3 episodes left, it's going to be hard to imagine the show without them.
Yeah, no, I'm upset and I don't even go here. Like, I am like, Jordan, why was this? I mean, great, like writing wise, great return. Emotionally, it's just like the Crocs deserve better. Right. Like they got everything.
I'm sure they'll be back.
They're shattered, Reed.
The other guy was shattered and came back.
No, but he has ice powers.
He can melt. He can melt and bring himself back.
We'll see.
Apparently. But yeah, set the stage now for the final 3 episodes. What side will the grandparents choose? What side will Cameron choose? What side will Cindy choose? Because it very much seems, without a doubt,
Yes.
it'll just happen to line up with everybody else's. But he's very much seems to be that he's out to get revenge on his former enemy or his former allies, because so far he's killed the gambler who he once worked with. He's attacked Starman, who was once his mortal enemy, but Starman was just in the wrong place at the wrong time. And now he's killed the Crocs, who were his former allies. So why it seems to be that he doesn't like the fact that the bad guys have gone good, and maybe he's trying to get revenge on them. And I think maybe the ultimate deciding factor in that test will be Cameron, because he's now been faced with a path of good versus bad. And I do feel like in the end, Cameron's a good person who's just been brought up into a very bad world. So I feel like all in all, he will choose good in the end. But yeah, the emotional stakes, the conflict, the choices, it's going to make for a very interesting final 3 episodes, and I can't wait. But I am still very upset about the Crocs, and I don't think I'll get over that.
That's understandable. I know you have a lot to headed towards you as you head towards the end of the season. End of the series. To the end of the series, but it sounds like it's going to be spectacular. That they're not resting on their laurels, which is good.
Yeah, I think we're in for like a worthy series finale, and I hate that I even have to say that, but I'm excited to see how it ends. And I have no doubt that the team behind Stargirl will make sure that it's been as high quality as the rest of the series. And I can't wait, even if I know for a fact I will be emotionally traumatized for the next 3 weeks.
Well, speaking of quality, Walker Independence is continuing to prove itself on the network. There's a lot happening in this episode, so much so that I've watched it twice and I feel like I didn't digest all of it. There was just so much that went on.
Okay, see, I told you guys I was going to rewatch it because this whole like talking about it a week after, like I'm blaming it on the CW. Like it's not working. Like it's just not. Anyway, but I didn't get to rewatch it, so I'm like, I feel like I remember the beginning and I remember like the climax. So you guys will have to fill in the gaps for me. I don't think I remember. Remember enjoying it?
Well, it started with Eli. It was interesting to start with a character we weren't introduced to first. That's Eli, apparently Tom's best friend who knew the devil had a friend. That was an apt title for the episode.
Yeah, we have another person 2 weeks in a row, someone close to Tom coming in. Different vibes.
True, because Teresa, his aunt is she is something. That is a queen pin. And Eli was a desperate man. He was not in charge of anything.
Yeah, he was like, we should start a bar, which was very giving the that one episode of How I Met Your Mother with Barney and Ted where they're drunk and they're like, we should start a bar. It's like not a good idea. And Tom and Walker Independence is like, no, I have other things going on. You need to get out of here, dude.
And Eli just wouldn't. They had a great opening sequence though with Eli, and I think the bounty hunter's name is Santiago. One of the things that I really like about Walker Independence is how much of a Western it is. It's like, it's not just like Western as a backdrop, like it really truly is rooted in Western tropes. Because him running from a bounty hunter and hopping onto his horse, like just with his hands and then going, it was an amazing sequence. I'm like, oh, we have the stunts, we have the things that we need to have for a Western.
I find that you see that a lot in the scenes that are, funnily enough, take place outside of Independence or just on the outskirts of it. We always see it when Callian goes tracking things as well, and it really does remind you that we're dealing with a really ambitious Western here. And sometimes it's easy to overlook that because you just get so attached to the characters and the stories. But this is, without a doubt, probably the most ambitious show on CW right now, and sometimes it's scenes like that take you out of the story, that remind you just how ambitious it was. And it was a great introduction to Eli as well.
And so was the fight between Tom and him, because apparently Eli likes to jump his friends in order to say hello after seeing them, not having seen them for years. But this whole episode was really about like different dynamics and friendships as well, in a very cute and way with Hoyt and Abby and oh god, why am I forgetting her name? Because I love her, Kate. Kate and there was some brush up between Gus and Callian too, and much needed conversation because apparently Gus feels left out, which I was like, oh, he could have more than one friend, Gus.
Yeah, it was important to them because they were established as one of the earliest dynamics in the show, and then you haven't seen it much. So I'm glad that we actually have a storyline to play on that. But yeah, I agree with you. I know what you mean. Like, he can't have more than one bestie. I think Gus is kind of so conflicted by what's going on right now. He doesn't know if he can trust the sheriff. He doesn't know where Abby's come from. And now Callian, who didn't like staying in town, is suddenly in town a lot more. And he's hanging around with some of the people that have raised Gus's suspicions. I see where they're going with this, and I think it makes for a good storyline, because I think Augustus is going to be faced with a choice at some point in time, and I'm going to be intrigued to see what choice he makes between trusting the sheriff and doing his duty like he's supposed to, or asking the questions that he needs to.
We had some unforeseen developments with Tom, right? Because there was that sequence toward the end, not to skip to the end, but when Eli takes, his name's Eli, right? You said Eli? Okay. Whew, it's been a week. When he takes Abby like hostage and holds her at gunpoint, Tom's like, whoa, 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 whoa. And I was like, oh, does he have a bit of a conscience as far as Abby's concerned?
Yes.
It was an interesting where I didn't expect him to draw that line there, but I was like, I don't hate it. It's confusing, but thoughts?
Yeah. Tom has a bit of a crush. I mean, it keeps like it's getting there. He got distracted in his conversation with Eli when Abby just simply went to the bar, and that's how Eli picked up on it. I think it is because I will say there's one thing I don't like about Walker Independence, and it's only because they're making me endeared to Tom. I was like, stop making me like Tom. He's supposed to be our villain.
I know we meet him as being this murderer, and like we're supposed to have his number, and then as with any good storytelling, I think as much as it's like frustrating, they start to break down that character like the anti-hero. And it's like, stop making me like him. I don't want to.
I know. Sorry, go ahead, Sabrina.
I was just gonna say it's because Greg's so good, and he has like puppy dog eyes, and you can tell Tom feels really deeply. I'm like, dang it, I wasn't supposed to like Tom. Here we are.
Yeah.
Exactly. And we did say in the first episode that he only appeared in like 2 scenes, and I think those 2 or 3 scenes, while they stayed with us, went a long way to try to highlight him. Like, I love the fact that there's no mystery over who killed Abby's husband. We've said that time and again. It's how is she going to get him is the mystery. And so we knew Tom's the villain of the piece right from the beginning, and the show went a long way to portray that. It was very much like man of few words, Undertaker, like the way it was shot. You barely seen below his hat, or below his eyes underneath his hat. He was and he was always in the shadows and those silhouettes. And now, as the season goes on, you're starting to see more of him. And particularly, I think the episode where Teresa showed up, it very much portrayed that, yes, he's a bad person, but he may be like a victim of the environment that he grew up in or that he was part of. Because by this looks of things, the Davisons are not good people. I mean, their reputation precedes them. And I think they're kind of using him as their instrument of destruction, because he is now in a position of power where he can that he can abuse if they need him to. And he is very much doing that thus far, just very secretly. But I think as it goes on, we're starting to see more of the side of who the real Tom could have been, what the real Tom was, and that he does have feelings, even if he's a bad person. And like Reed said, I think that makes for a much more interesting, well-rounded villain as well.
It does. It's just frustrating. Especially because the show is also like, even at the end when Gus was like, actually, I know who might have killed Liam, and it's not Tom. And I was like, wait, no, don't make it even more complicated for us.
I know, like what information have you been sitting on, sir?
I know. Because he's all like, I wish you'd come to me earlier. Like, or you could have told Callie and yourself, Gus. That's possible.
Yeah, the phone works both ways, even though there's not electricity in this time.
Yeah, Gus always knew where to find him. I don't know why he didn't just do that.
No, probably because he was like, you're talking to other people, and so therefore I can't trust you right now. No, I love Gus. It was just funny because it did very much reminded me of like, because I think it's because Gus doesn't really have anybody else. He has Callie, and I guess in some ways he has Tom, but that's a working relationship that's quite fraught. He even had to tell Tom to fix his tone with him.
Oh, what a scene that was, yeah.
That was great. I was like, not Gus being like, I know you're not talking to me that way.
Kate and Abby's similar dynamic this episode was frustrating to me, because I could see where I understand where Abby's coming from. She's like, you know what I want you to know, and can you please leave it there? And Kate's coming at it very I think in her intentions are good. Like she's coming at it lovingly. Like you're going to be asked these questions by other people, and they're not going to be as nice as me. And she's coming to her as like a friend. Like you can trust me. And Abby's like, I trust myself. I don't know who I can trust, but I know I can trust myself. Um, but it was nice to see Abby at the end of the day help Kate out of that jam when things got dicey. So that complicated friendship, I think, is just going to continue to get better as Abby realizes, like, yeah, I can open up to her. But I see where she's coming from because sometimes I'm like, would I trust Kate? Because she does have her own like agenda as this spy, whatever she is. But she does seem like she's really caring toward Abby. But I'm like, is that part of her game? I love her. Don't get me wrong, but just those questions popped into my head.
Well, and she didn't answer any of her own. She didn't answer any questions this episode either. She was the one asking all of them because she wanted Abby to be an open book. And I was like, Kate, you're not playing your own game. What's something that we don't know about you?
I appreciated the work that this episode did as far as them to go, because I felt like it kind of made up for the work the previous episode didn't do. Because I remember I said when they found out who each other were, they were very open very quickly, and then it suddenly turned in, well, we have to get you introduced to Way, and Kate turned around and go, Way, and then suddenly smack down, next scene, all the introductions have been done, nobody's asking any questions now, or it's a dynamic of 3 have suddenly turned into a dynamic of 4. And I was like, okay, but Kate's a bit of an interesting character. Or should we not be asking more questions here? I think this episode made us asking them more questions about Kate because she was doing all the asking questions in general. And I really like the fact that her and Abby have had one of the more solid friendships on the show, because they weren't asking those questions to begin with and they were keeping secrets from each other. So it was all nicey. Whereas now, because they know more, they are starting to ask more questions. And I think that went a long way in like solidifying them. I do agree we don't know enough about Kit yet, and I think that's intentional, but I do like the fact that this episode kind of made up for the previous one, and it makes it look better in hindsight now that Abby's like, wait, can I trust you? Why are you asking me all these questions? Same as Kit is like, why haven't you been telling me the truth? They're both very complicated characters, and I think we're going to see more of that as it goes on.
And with Abby's grief, it was interesting. She has this portrait of Liam in her mind that she has to keep a certain way because he's passed away. And Kate like punched that thing over and over and over again in this episode because it makes Abby have to question things herself about her husband, things that she noticed but was pushing to the side. And it does make her wonder, like, who was my husband and like why did we leave? Like he kept saying it was because of all the bad things that happened in Boston, which I am glad that they keep seeding in these little bits of information about her Boston life, especially when it comes to her family and that dynamic, and learning that her father did not approve of Liam. And we already knew that Abby was headstrong, but seeing how she went up against her father and how that she is one to challenge authority when need be, and that keeps becoming a problem for her. It creates trouble, but it's interesting trouble that she keeps getting into. So I can't wait to find out more about what's happening, because everybody apparently has run away from something. So I want to know what Kate's running away from, and what Callion's secret is, because Gus knows it, but we don't yet. Because there's something that apparently he was hiding, unless that hiding thing was just that he was hiding the Tom stuff, and then never mind about that comment.
I don't know.
It does feel like everybody is not saying what they mean, and there are secrets abound here. And I think that's a good thing, because like, even though we have our established dynamics, somebody knows more than somebody else, and that could end up causing conflict. I know I do like all of the dynamics and the secrets, but I think of all of the things, Boston is not done with the story yet. I feel like we're going to find out more. It very much has this like shadowy overarching presence, and I feel like a lot of the answers lie in the past, and maybe that's why Abby is being so like cold when it comes to talking about her past, and understandably so with everything that's happened. But I think as she gets her eyes open more and more, we'll get our eyes open more and more as well, because I feel like there are a lot of secrets and answers lie in whatever went down in Boston, both with Liam, the Davidsons. Yeah, I think there's a lot of mysteries that have yet to be solved as far as Boston goes.
And that's what makes it a great show. There's just something in every piece of dialogue, every dynamic, every scene. It was interesting with Abby how she, not cold, because this man, she does believe this man murdered her husband, but I loved how like her seeing him break down over his loved one didn't change her mission. She just acknowledged that yes, he's a person with feelings, but also he killed my husband.
She can contain multitudes. She can have empathy and also want revenge.
Yes, I love that. There wasn't sort of a slip to, oh, well, he's not a good person, but like he loves someone too. Like there was
She's
none of
like,
that
aw,
conflict.
aw,
Yes.
I'm back.
Yes, she was. It's so great. She's a great heroine. Like she's a
Mhm.
great protagonist. One of the best CW has done. And I say that having only seen the first few episodes of Walker Independence. We haven't even finished the season yet. But I just feel like she's one of the best CW ladies we've gotten.
It's a great character. And every episode has been beautifully composed, but this episode in particular, these directors and DPs are just the language they have put into every shot. They've set this gorgeous tone for the show, and it's a treat to watch every scene. Like you're not expecting some of these scenes to look so good, but they are amazing.
Was there anything else though? But besides like, well, I feel like every week we're like, it's amazing, but it's hard not to do that because there's so much thought that is put into each episode of Walker Independence.
I don't know, like I said, I barely remembered anything.
Just on following up on Reed's note, yeah, I do want to just shout out. Was it the scene where Eli was Eli slowly making his way towards Higgins or whatever? The lighting in that scene, when you saw Independence at night, we don't always see Independence at night. The way it was shot, the lighting underneath the buildings, the dark night sky, again, it just made it feel so larger than life. You get so used to seeing the show in the daylight and everything. And now shooting outdoors is a huge thing for this network, but you get used to it. Seeing Independence in a different light, the way it's shot, the way the characters move through it, it gives it a life of its own. And I also just wanted to commend how visually stunning the show is.
Yeah. Okay. It's I will just put this in my perspective. It's the best show on the CW right now.
The Walker Independence fan club.
I agree. Yeah.
Oh, awesome. Well, other like best shows of the CW has ever done has excellent visual. I'm forgetting the word. There's something there. I was good. Let's just go with cinematography because where I was going with that sentence, it petered off and fell off a cliff. But like, so we're doing the Nancy double feature, and that opening for the penultimate episode was amazing.
Mm-hmm.
Didn't we swirl into the shot? I feel like it turns, and then you're with Nancy and her dad as they're arguing about the fact that he kept this secret from her. And I paused, I think, a minute in because she displaced Kate immediately, and I was like, not your mama.
Yeah, that scene was tough to watch because I feel like my instinct always, and I'm not proud of this, but like whenever some of these conversations come up, I'm like, ah. And I think it's just I don't want to see the characters hurt like this because she's unpacking so much pain that just came at her like a Mack truck. Like it was in an instant, her whole existence just unraveled. But I'm like I understand what Carson and Kate did for her, why they did it for Lucy. And I'm like, I know that you can get to that point, but as a viewer, it's like, that's what I think what's successful about it, because you can be frustrated. You're like, oh, they did something good. And there is a moral gray area because they did lie to you for 20 years. And I just wanted her to see it, but I loved how she walked through that because for as much as we always get on Nancy's case about making questionable choices, she does have an emotional intelligence from time to time because she knows herself better than anybody. And she knew, like, I need to process this alone. Her instinct is always to retreat and isolate whenever something happens. And she very much immediately did that. And I think it was less from a place of, I'm mad at you, please don't talk to me. It was more of a place like, you're trying to take the pain away, and nothing that you will say in this moment will change anything. And it's also kind of self-serving because you want me to feel better so that you feel less guilty, but I am not ready for that. So she's like, everybody, please leave me alone as I process this. And like she said to Ace, not to fast forward through all of this, but she was like, when I have the words,
Mhm.
I will express them to you. So I thought that opening scene where she is just rightfully brutal to Carson, and even though I was like, I don't want you to hurt like this, Nancy, it was very necessary.
Mhm. Yeah, to follow up on what I said about Stargirl earlier on, I love when a show picks right up after the cliffhanger because it doesn't skip the aftermath, and this very much let us sit with it. And yeah, I totally agree. You felt everything you could possibly feel for both characters because you see all sides to the story, and that makes you conflicted because you're like, well, who do I resonate with more? Because I totally saw where Nancy was coming from, but at the same time, you understood the position Carson and Kate were in all those years ago. So how do you feel like angry towards either one of them when you totally understand where they're both coming from? And also, just I know we're probably going to say it many times throughout this review, but like Kennedy's performance, oh my, like you felt, I felt like I was attacked in those first 2 minutes of the episode, and watching what is basically a bumper double length finale for us. We got attacked many times throughout those 2 episodes, but like just to get attacked so soon, it really made you, it did really feel like the story was coming together, but at the same time everything was unraveling and you couldn't help but feel for everyone involved. But my goodness, what a performance from Canada.
And she deserves, surprised she didn't get an award for this.
Right.
Because it is absolutely stunning work, the way her emotions build. And she does so well with I don't know how you describe it. It's like trying to put a top on a pot that's boiling over. Like clearly Nancy has too many feelings to handle, which is why she's literally walking away, like running away from them. Like we're in the kitchen, we're up the stairs, we're in the room, and then we're out the window after she closes the door on her dad. And Kennedy, I mean, that felt like a marathon scene. Like she could have been over the top. She could have gotten there way too fast. And so by the time she gets to the emotional peak, she's been petered out. And instead, it just felt like soul crushing. It just felt like like Carson, you just stop talking, like stop talking. She can't talk right now. So that she can leave. And then she does. And then the understanding she comes to at the end. By the way, Nancy's so mean. I love her, but those barbs are like they're so cutting. But towards the end of the episode, when she tells her dad that she understands having a secret that you don't want anyone to know about, but then she just shoves the knife in deeper. But like she understands, but she's still not talking to you. Like because also she told her secret because she had to, and I was just like, Kennedy, I don't know how you had to live in that headspace for that long, but that frustration of Nancy's and the scaredness there, she looks like a little girl whenever she's talking to Ryan and trying to piece together, like, would he have wanted me? How would he have felt? Like, let me just ask these questions that I really don't need to be asking because she was asking questions that he should have been like, why are you asking me this? But he was just answering because it's Ryan and he doesn't keep more than 2 thoughts in his head most of the time. So like, I can't even say I like Ryan. I know the Ryan fans are probably going to get on me for that. But that has a lot to do with the unpacking of this man that they did in these 2 episodes. And at least in season 1, he's not a good person, like by any stretch of the imagination, but he clearly did love Lucy.
He did. Episode 17, the penultimate, is when he and Nancy go to that free clinic, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, to go back to Kennedy's performance for a second and Nancy in this episode, I feel like she's gone through a lot of hard times this season, but this season Kennedy carries Nancy's emotions a lot differently. Like for the first time we see her just like depleted. Like there's something in her that just like someone blew the fire out, and it does kind of come back when she's kind of like, I need to solve this mystery and wrap this thing up. I'm exhausted. But there are so many scenes where like Nancy's present, she's taking in the information, but just you can tell she's been defeated by all of this and she's trying to keep going. And in those free clinic scenes, she's like playing a double agent. She's like, I'm just gonna tag along with this guy to kind of see what this would be like, but not tell him. That was interesting though, because I thought she was going to tell him a lot sooner. I didn't think she was going to string him alone, but I'm glad that she did, because she got to see like, oh, okay, so that's how he acts in the wild, trying to throw a checkbook everywhere.
Yeah, it was very interesting. The thing I enjoyed most about this episode, and its timing might be a little bit convenient, but was the fact that she needed a blood relative for the ritual. So that kind of forced everything forward. It forced her to have to address this, and it forced her to have to admit it to everyone else. Because, of course, while Ace very much became a confidant, and they'd be having their own secret meetings to talk about this, which, of course, we're about to get into. But everybody else did not need to know this, and it was her choice as to when to tell everybody, if she wanted to tell everyone. And yet this ritual forced all their hand. And I usually I hate it when an episode feels like a waste at the end, but the fact that the ritual didn't work and yet it still forced that story forward, I thought that was a genius move, because it didn't kill any of the overarching story. The Aglika is still very much a big threat.
It did kill Owen though.
Very true, exactly. So the story is not over, but at the same time, that hurdle she had to get over about addressing that came and went because of the story. Her hand was forced, and it brought the conflict forward very nicely. And it basically left everyone stunned. Like, wait, why is Ryan here? That was like so much going on in that scene. And like Reed said, Nancy was depleted. She did not want to be there.
She was so casual about it when she said it. When was it? Someone was like, "Are you guys cousins or something?" And she was like, here's the quick recap. You know what? You're going to get the Cliff's Notes. I don't feel like explaining it. Let's just do this.
Well, and it was so emotional too, because we're literally in this like ritual where clearly she needs a blood relative, and she's not telling any of her friends why Ryan is even here. And so I think it was Bess who was like, "Are you cousins?" And she was like, "No." And she's like, and she's like, "Let's just read the thing." And Ace gave her such emotional support. In episode 17, I think 18 too. They're kind of mixing in my head right now.
Yeah.
But he was really just there as a pillar of strength for her. Like, he didn't go tell her business. He was, when she wasn't going to answer about who Ryan is to her, he said, "Let's just do the ritual. Just going to keep on going." But she's in so much. I love how the emotional pain she's in then has to translate into physical pain because of the ritual. And the way that her and Ryan's hands are at the start of it, where they're just pressed together and there's all that blood coming out. And then like they're holding on to each other's hands as she has to, through the pain, explain who Lucy is to her and who Ryan is to her now. And then the shock that ripples through their friend group was just a lot. I just think, to me, this episode was better than the finale, actually. Like, the penultimate episode was so emotionally charged and so about Nancy. And they kept giving Kennedy these little scenes to just like blow up. So you have her blowing up by the car with Ryan when he's like, "Yeah, we should just let Owen die." And she's like, "Excuse me?" And she's like, "Why are you like this?" And she goes on that tirade. She calls him morally bankrupt. He's a legacy criminal who's into teenage girls. Yes, she did. And he was like, he got upset. He's like, "You know what? Find your own way home." And I was like, "You can't just leave her here." But he does.
Oof. I do want to, you did touch on his romantic situation with George. And that was a big thing that happened. And I wanted to touch on that because there was a part of me that was like, oh, this kind of feels like it's coming out of nowhere a little bit, but that's not at all. After I thought about it, I was like, no, this has been George's arc building. And I'm so glad that they did this, because a lot of times in television shows, especially ones from when we were growing up, they would always portray the older person dating the teenager as like sexy. And like, even if people were against it, they would still try to fight for it. And they never made a point to say that was not right. And there have been shows, even modern shows recently, that have fumbled that so hard. But to see George coming to that realization quickly, and it maybe some people will be like, oh, she wouldn't have come to that clarity so quickly. That was just like a device for her and Nick to get together. But I was like, I think it was important for them, not only for George to come to this reckoning, but to portray this relationship that was in this season and to fully circle back to it and be like, no, that was not okay what he did with her, dating her when she was 17. And it did cause some emotional damage that she didn't realize at the time because she was the one that was young. It reminded me of that new Demi Lovato song 29. I don't know if you guys have heard it, but as soon as she started having that conversation with Ryan, that song played in my head because that's what it's about. It's about the wisdom that comes with age when you're like, oh, that relationship I had as a teenager was not okay. And I'm only realizing this now, but I think it was very brave of her to tell him that and say, what you did was wrong, and I'm still dealing with that. And again, it's another person trying to take her pain away and be like, oh, I'm so sorry. And she's like, I don't want anything from you. I'm here to tell you for me to get this off of me. Like, that was not okay. And I thought that was a really brave and beautiful scene. And Leo was so good in it too. I didn't love that I'm George freaking fan though, because I feel like that they do that a lot in TV. It was cute. But that was my one gripe with it. But it was deserved. She earned that. Yeah, that scene was I loved them tying George's arc up like that.
It gave reason for the tension between Vanson because that's in the finale. So like when the finale opens and those two are being weird yet again, I was like, I'm gonna need someone to treat Nick right. Do I have to call Tom Swift to send him like, come get your boy? But I did like that it was more than PDA. Like it was her not knowing how to negotiate being in a relationship with someone because the only point of reference she has is with Ryan. And him not taking accountability at first, like Ryan not taking accountability at first, was like, how do you not understand that you dating a 17-year-old was not okay? He's like, you seemed fine. And it's just like, she wasn't fine.
Yeah, you're the adult in the situation. Your perspective is a lot different. She may seem like she's mature, but we saw in that scene with Nick when she's explaining like everything that she came to, we've never seen George that vulnerable and open. And she's usually so front-facing confident. Like she puts on that air. And I mean, that's how she is naturally, but sometimes I think it is a defense mechanism. But she let it all down and let the whole wall down for Nick. And I'll say it again, I love seeing George like that because I think it was a very deserved full circle arc for the season.
One of my favorite things about the show is how it sometimes buries really, really powerful meaning storylines like within the main body of the story, so you don't see it coming until it hits you. And this was an example of that. Like Sabrina said, there was an awful lot of inexplicable tension between her and Nick, and it just felt like it kind of came out of nowhere. And then they added some real powerful depth to it. And I know I agree that I thought the penultimate episode was better than the finale, but the George's whole arc in the finale was my favorite part of it because it was such like a as Reed said, full circle moment. And she really took control of everything of a situation that she felt like she didn't have control of when she was younger. And it really resonated. And not only just like the performances from Leah, but just the writing as well. I know she had her big badass I'm George freaking fan moment at the end, but the dialogue leading up to that was really, really powerful. And I think that ended up being my favorite scene from the finale. And it was probably the most like important scene as far as character goes for George yet. And the fact that it kind of, like I said, kind of felt like it didn't feel like it came out of nowhere, but it caught me off guard because I didn't think the show would go that deep. Yeah, I didn't think the show would go that deep that quickly.
Well, because we don't really see stuff like that in shows. Like we don't see someone really taking their power back in that way. And the show was very explicit about it without being like a very special episode. You know, it was. It was really, I'll say it, I keep saying it, but it was very necessary, and they pulled it off.
They did. And it's good that this was done and contained in this season. That way we can see George grow in season 2 and figure out how she wants to be in a relationship because she doesn't know. um, to how to be in a relationship that's, out in the public. Like it's not, Ryan always kept her behind closed doors. She could only talk to him at certain times. He always made her feel very small. And Nick doesn't do that. And I love that part of Lansing's relationship is George coming into her own and allowing herself to be vulnerable, because she doesn't have a relationship to do that in. She's always the strong one with her mom, with her sisters, even in her friendships. And so in her romance, there's room for her to be vulnerable and not always be okay and be
allow
open and
herself to
honest.
be taken care of too, because
Yeah.
she's independent, love it, but she sometimes it can be to a fault. And Nick is a very like his love language is like acts of service. He like loves to take care of people, and there's nothing wrong with that. But I think George is usually like, what, that she's like, that's not how I show love, so why are you doing that? Like, I take care of everybody else. But yeah, I loved seeing her confront all of that. It was really well done. There were other full circle moments too for characters like Bess. Like, she begins the season like desperately wanting to be a Marvin, and now she's a Marvin. In the final like sequence, she's like, I don't know anything about this family. The Iglesias in this painting. Did I make a mistake?
They're not a great family. Maybe you should just call your mama over in London or something and just be happy with her and this found family that you have, because the Marvins they're a trip, and so is Aunt Diana. And it really does seem like this is not about love. This is about hierarchy, and she's also standing with the aunt with the money, and the fact that she's Bess is walking a fine line in her relationship with Elizabeth. For her aunt. I was like, Auntie don't deserve all this. She really don't. Her affection is transactional, and you're going to find that out the hard way. Not that I will say my feelings on Bess and Elizabeth has kind of cooled. Elizabeth sort of just serves a police purpose, and she pops in for conflict for Bess, and that's about it. Like, the relationship hasn't progressed past that, and I don't know if it will. But as far as giving Bess a through line of discomfort and not being like the part of the comic relief, that's sort of what Elizabeth and the Marvins serve for her. Same with Owen. I wasn't sad that he died. I was sad that Nancy was upset. And
it felt like it was always going to happen though. Like, somebody was going to be a casualty of all this. But I should I issue an apology to Owen? I was so untrusting of him, and it turns out he was fine.
Yeah, he's apparently a good guy. And I too was like, I'm sorry, Owen.
That was the thing that stayed with me. I was like, we thought this guy was like too good to be true, and it turns out no, he actually was just pretty decent. They used him for every decent storyline they could, and then his run on the show came to an end. He wasn't too good to be true, but he was too good to keep alive, apparently.
Sorry, Owen.
Yeah.
May you rest in peace.
But speaking of Owen's death, did you guys see it coming that it was Josh Dodd or Lucy's?
No.
I didn't either. I thought it was the Iglesias, and we were like, here we are, full steam ahead, next villain.
I didn't like that reveal. I felt like we're like, no, who could it be? And it just ends up being Josh. I did like, though, that Nancy had a scene with Patrice, where she got to tell her grandmother who she is.
When she pulled up to that nursing home again and went in the room, I was like, Nancy, girl, not again. Stressed me out the first time you did this, and thankfully it went better. It was dicey in the beginning, but she was like, I'm your granddaughter, and suddenly Patrice was like, oh, okay.
Yeah,
I was like, okay, well, thank you for not emotionally manipulating the woman this time, Nancy. It all worked out for you.
Wait, Josh is arrested now, right? I realized I tuned out of that part of the story. Okay.
I think they gave Bess that line of dialogue. She was like, she said it to Elizabeth, thank you for putting Josh in jail.
Oh, okay. Well, goodbye, Josh.
Yeah. Thought you were dead, but
I know he got very serial killer-y and felt like, I don't know, want to say it happened overnight, but I know those last few episodes were very closely knitted together as far as the timeline goes. I don't know how I felt about that, because she was just finding out this family of hers was her actual family. And then he was even though he was responsible for Tiffany's unfortunate death, you saw the pieces leading up to it, and then he just kind of turned into a serial killer that was like resurrected from the dead. I mean, it plays into the tone of the show, but I mean, like, just with the depth of her story, I don't know whether that gelled as much for me. Maybe there's more story yet to come. I don't know. The season was cut slightly short, if I'm right in thinking. Was it with the 18 episodes? This was around the pandemic shutdown, wasn't it?
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So that's why maybe the penultimate had more finale feels than the actual finale. But yeah, it was a solid, and the show made it work. But yeah, it was a bit of an unusual pivot to like full on serial killer uncle for me overnight.
And I really want them to come to this realization as a unit, as like, it feels like the thing that's brought them all together is that they're all searching for some sort of family, some kinship. Like Bess wants that family connection with her roots, and George has a very turbulent home life, and then Nick doesn't really have anybody. Ace is kind of on his own. Nancy feels very alone. And I want them to realize, like, whatever you're searching for, it's in this group of 5 people. Like, you found it, you have it. And maybe they have realized it and they're not saying it explicitly, which is like obviously great writing, because like we can see it happening. But I want them to come to that understanding that like they don't need to search elsewhere. They've got it. They have each other. They're their own family now. They've been through too much to to not be a family at this point.
I'm hoping that that is what we see in the opening for season 2, since they all saw themselves die in very traumatic ways. So like just sharing circle. Like I don't care whose house it is, but like tell each other what happened. I think the one that was like, oh, we need a trigger warning. To me, it was when Ace's death. When I saw his feet dangling, I was like, oh no.
Yeah, that was a lot.
It got worse. It was quite a lot. None of them deserve to die that way. I do wonder if that is going to play into season 2. If there's a specific reason why they all were shown that way of dying, or if it just was proximity. Like Bess was near a fire, therefore she's on fire. Ace was near the freezer, therefore the meat hook. Like, I don't know. The Aglega is going to be really interesting as a villain. It's hard to call it. She's vengeful. I don't really know if I want to call her a villain. It just seems like you didn't pay her toll, so now you're gonna have to deal with it.
And they thought they got away when they saved Josh. They're like, oh, maybe this will tip the scales. And it's like, I don't know if it works that way, guys.
Very angry.
I did appreciate the closing montage, even if it was quite traumatizing, because it reminded me, even if this was something of an unplanned finale, it reminded me of how the show opened. The first 2 pilot part 1 and pilot part 2, as we call it, both ended with those like dramatic monologues of like, this is the world we're in, this is what the future looks like. And that was very much the vibe I got from the finale montage there. It is going to be interesting to see how big a role the Aglega will play here. Is this just the remnants of the season 1 villain carried over, or are we dealing with full on season 2 big bad? Either way, totally on board. It's going to be an interesting pivot from like the realistic murder mystery, especially since we did solve the other realistic murder mystery in Owen's demise. But yeah, we've got some interesting stories to look forward to in season 2. And I feel like the only thing we didn't really get into is the Nancy and Ace moments, because that one where Nancy was like, she has a lot of stuff to unpack, and when I find the words, I'll tell you them. I feel like if you haven't seen the crumbs, you certainly saw them after that, right?
Yeah, that was like a sandwich. That was
because the crumbs were like all the ways in which he was like checking in on her just by looking. He's really supportive. Like Nace, I feel like for Nace, Ace's position, at least right now, is being the person that's not really requiring anything of Nancy. Like if she needs someone to lean on, that's Ace. Like, and he's still like him. I love that he's still sort of comic relief too around her. Like the blue jars, and he's like, no sign of Tinkerbell. And she kind of just.
And when he pulled up, I don't remember which episode it was, but when he pulled up and he was like, "Get in."
And then he called Owen looking for her too, because he knew where she would be.
Yeah. He's the one that can really disarm her, and I'm not totally sure if I think they're aware of their connection or if it just exists, because they do have a comfort with each other that I'm not sure that they realize what it means. Do you know what I mean? Like, it doesn't seem like they're fully aware that there's a deeper connection there.
Yeah.
And it's pretty. That's what people love about shipping, right?
Yeah. And because I feel like when the show started, they were the one that had the least kind of dynamic. You know, George and Nancy had the history from high school. And Nick and Nancy were obviously in a relationship, and Bess was this unusual character that Nancy kind of connected to right away. So that kind of left Ace out, not out in the cold, but he was the one that she didn't have a specific relationship with. And I feel like as the season's gone on and the two of them have been investigating things together, and very much in a Scooby-Doo scenario, whereas like you three split up and we'll do this, Nancy and Ace always ended up paired off. So they've kind of come together by I think the thing that drew them together is just that they're a great team and they can clearly trust each other, which just kind of feels like it came out of nowhere, I'm sure, to Nancy, because like she didn't have that relationship with him. So I just feel like it's kind of happened to them too without them realizing it. They haven't forced this, they haven't addressed this, and it's just all happened really naturally for them. And I think now, I don't even know if they're realizing it yet, but I know the viewers would be. They're starting to realize that they do make a great double act and there's some chemistry there and there is a kinship. And these two would not have described each other as friends in the early going, and now they've really connected, which is great to say.
Yeah, I agree. There's not an awareness. I will say though that I felt from the pilot that Nancy likes Ace. It's just the way that she is around him. Like when she walks into the kitchen for the first time, it's the way she looks at him before she veers off into the rest of it. And just the amount, like Reed, you had spoken to like her emotional intelligence, at least in regards to herself. I do think she has a lot of that, but I'm not sure if she does when it comes to how her feelings towards romance.
Oh yeah, romance. She needs a roadmap. She's lost.
Yeah, because honestly, I was like, you like him. You're not there yet realizing it, but you do. I think it's much easier for her to connect to attraction first. And she was attracted to Nick and she was attracted to Owen. Not to say that she's not attracted to Ace, but there is a level of comfort there in kinship and connection that doesn't need to transcend if she doesn't want it to. Like she's able to like do a back and forth, but with Ace there isn't a back and forth. It just feels really warm.
I said, sorry, did I interrupt you? Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I always said that the two of them, or she was kind of intrigued by him. And I think that's maybe why she's connected with him so well. She's such a detective and she figures people out. And when she can't figure people out, she tries to figure them out. And with S, I think he's just such an unusual character. She's always been intrigued from. And I think as the season's gone on, that's turned into a real endearment. You'll see like when he says something funny and everyone just stops and she just kind of looks at him. It's almost like you're waiting on the laugh track to kick in, and then she just moves on because she doesn't know what to make of him. And like in the library episode when the two of them went investigating on the computer together, and he started telling her about how he did this and how he did that and how he created this firewall and this safe wall, she just kind of looked at him and was like, why would you do that? She doesn't know what to make of him. And I think that intrigued mind that she has turned into an endearment over time.
And to your guys' point, I think he requires less from her. Like he understands her, whereas I mean Nick and Ace are very different in the way that they approach relationships. Nick, and this isn't a good or bad thing, he needs to be seen a little bit more. And Nancy, we've talked about this a lot, she couldn't really give him that, whereas it feels like Ace understands her in a little bit a different way. Like he knows how she is and what the space that she requires sometimes, and he doesn't always need to be what's like reassured or like anything. Like they just have this connection, and I think it all comes down to just what Nick and Ace need, that and what Nancy can provide. I do think she's getting a little bit better, but she is pretty much who she is. What you see is what you get. She's always on the run. She's always go, go, go. And either you're on board or you're not.
Yeah, because with Nick, he's very hands-on. He has to be like, he's like a blanket, hot cup, like a hot cup of coffee, or like what am I thinking of? hot chocolate or something. He has to be the one to like take care of you.
Yeah, he's like a caretaker in a way.
He is.
And that's not a bad thing. I'll just keep saying it's not a bad thing at all.
It's a really lovely thing. It's just not what Nancy can handle. It's too much for her. Like, she doesn't want your blanket. She doesn't want your hot chocolate. She prefer what Ace does, which is Ace is kind of just, he's there, right? He'll sit in a chair. If you want to talk, you want to talk.
But he's not a pushover. He'll be the one that says, get in the car. We need you.
Yeah.
He'll be the one to tell her what she needs to hear, but he's also going to be the one that's like, I'm here whenever you need me. And not in like a transactional way or like you can use me, but in a way that's very caring.
Yeah, it's lovely. It's really lovely, actually, that the love languages on this show are treated as equal. Like, obviously, sometimes you don't mesh with people or you have a great connection like Nick and Nancy did. It's just they didn't mesh with what they need right now in their lives. Like,
yeah, timing, like you said, right now, timing is a big thing. And over the course of 18 episodes, all of their lives have changed in
so much
in different ways. So who Nancy was in episode 1 is not who she is in episode 18. So, but who's to say that if Nick and Nancy were to try now, who knows if that would have been better or worse than when they did happen. This just got really deep.
Yeah, it did. But I think it's just because Nancy Drew is a very deep show. I think, to answer your question, I don't think they'd work right now either.
Yeah,
it's
I don't
just
think
too
they would.
much. It's just, he's
too much has happened. Too much has happened.
I know. But I'll still love Drewson forever. Even the Nace is like, I get it. I do. I think I'll be there, like fully there. The way truly these writers love them, because it's very romantic how they've written them, but like a slow burn romantic thing. There's just, it's gonna pay off when we get to that part. Like, it just, all the seeds and scenes, it's gonna be amazing.
Storytelling.
I'm looking forward to seeing how Nancy and Nick's friendship evolves over the next 2 seasons, because
best friends.
Yeah, because now he's in a relationship with somebody else who she's also close to, and I think that evolution will be really great to watch. They can all grow from this, and I think they all have bigger fish to fry that they probably should not be too concerned about who's dating who.
That's true, but the emotions are messy. But I think it'll actually be fine. I do think they're gonna end up being best friends. I like the moment where he tells Ace to stay with Nancy, and he goes over to be what George needs him to be. And I was like, I still get content. Okay, well, that is the end of season 1 for us, though. I mean, it was a ride. It was a fantastic ride. It was beautiful. It was like one of the best things CW has ever done.
An incredible first season. An incredible first season.
Just
absolutely
amazing.
Yeah, I loved it. I'm so glad we finally started the show, because we've talked about it for so long, and like, it was absolutely worth the wait. And I know maybe statistically that was a cut short first season, but like, it didn't feel like it in the slightest. Everything came together. The story panned out. The mystery was so worthwhile, and so much character work in the first season. I'm not sure I expected that level of it, considering it's quite the big cast. On board and ready for season 2.
When we're gonna catch up, we will in time for when
it's gonna happen.
It's gonna happen. But yeah, on board for season 2, and just to toast Nancy Drew in general, and for the season 1, because it is. If you haven't watched it, I'm sure if you're watching the review, you have watched Nancy Drew. But if you haven't and you're still listening to the pod, you should change that. It's on HBO Max, seasons 1 through 3. Season 4 is premiering next year, likely in January. That we don't have a premiere date yet.
Come join us. Yeah, Toast and Nancy, come join us in Horseshoe Bay. It's a messy place, but it's worthwhile.
Okay, well, that's it for this week's pod. We are the CW Spiral. I'm Sabrina.
I'm Michael.
And I'm Reed.
Bye, y'all.